Good day, everyone. Let's discuss the issues of the novel Eat, Pray, Love, One Woman's Search for Everything Across Italy, India, and Indonesia by Elizabeth Gilbert in 2006. So the novel's first issue is cultural appropriation and spiritual commodification. Critics argue that Gilbert's portrayal of Western spiritual practices reduces them to commodities for Western consumption. Her engagement with diverse cultures is seen as superficial, treating profound tradition as tools for personal comfort. This approach is viewed as trivializing the depth and complexity of these belief systems. So one of the major issue with the novel is how it treats other cultures, no, especially when it comes to religion and spirituality. So in the novel rather, Elizabeth Gilbert travels to India and Indonesia, no, and explores spiritual practices like meditation and prayer. However, some readers feel that she uses this spiritual tradition more like tools to fix her personal problems than as meaningful practices to be respected. It seems like she is borrowing from these cultures without fully understanding or honoring them. When someone takes something meaningful from another culture just for personal gain or enjoyment, that's often seen as disrespectful. Critics say that Gilbert didn't really dive deep into the cultures, but rather pick out the parts that made her feel better and ignore the rest. The novel's second issue is privilege, perspective, and accessibility. The, the memoir has been critiqued for highlighting a journey that is financially and practically out of reach for most people. Gilbert's ability to take a year-long trip across three countries is rooted in significant financial resources and personal freedom, making her story less relatable to those without such privileges. So another problem people have with a novel, no, is that not everyone can do what Gilbert did. She was able to take a whole year off from her job and travel to three different countries, which cost a lot of money. No, so most people have jobs, families, and responsibilities they can't just leave behind. Because of this, some readers say her story doesn't really relate to everyday people. The journey of healing and self discovery sounds great, but it's something only a few people can actually afford. So, while her story may seem inspiring, it also reminds people of the gap between those who have the freedom to chase happiness and those who don't. The last issue we have now is promotion of neoliberal individualism. The narrative's focus on personal fulfillment and self-discovery has been interpreted as promoting a sense of individualism that may come at the expense of communal and societal responsibilities. Gilbert's journey emphasizes personal happiness, potentially sidelining the importance of collective well-being and interconnectedness. So it is about how the novel focuses so much on personal happiness. No, Gilbert's journey is all about fixing her own life and finding peace and love for herself. While taking care of yourself is important, some people think the novel forgets about helping others or being part of a bigger community. It sends a message that solving your problems is just about working on yourself, not about changing the world around you or helping those in need. This way of thinking can make people feel like they should always focus on themselves first, even when there are larger problems in the world. Critics say that this me first attitude is a problem because it encourages people to look inward instead of outward. That's all for the issue of the novel Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert in 2006. Now let's proceed to the influence of the novel on other writings. So, Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love has inspired numerous authors to explore themes of self discovery, travel, and personal transformation. So here are three literary works influenced by Gilbert's memoir. First, we have Everything I Know About Love by Alderton. Dolly Alderton's memoir, Everything I Know About Love, delves into the complexities of female friendships, love, and the journey of self discovery. Alderton has expressed admiration for Elizabeth Gilbert's work, particularly in how it portrays soul travel and personal growth. In an interview on the Women Who Travel podcast, Alderton discussed how Gilbert's perspective influenced her own experiences and writing. She shared her journey of self discovery through travel, starting with her first solo trip at 23 years old, and emphasized the empowerment and personal growth that comes from such experiences. So, Alderton's memoir, Everything I Know About Love Now, is a personal story about growing up, falling in love, and finding yourself. Like Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love, Alderton shares her experiences in an honest and relatable way. One of the biggest similarities is how both authors talk about the value of being alone and learning about themselves through life's ups and downs. Alderton was influenced by Gilbert's courage to travel alone and reflect on her life. In fact, she mentioned how Gilbert's story encouraged her to try solo travel too, which helped her grow as a person. Alderton's writing showed that, just like Gilbert, personal growth doesn't always come from romance. It often comes from understanding yourself and the people around you. Next is Olive by Emma Gannon. Emma Gannon's novel Olive explores the life of a woman who confidently chooses to be child-free, challenging societal norms and expectations. Gannon cited Eat, Pray, Love as one of the books that influenced her creation of the protagonist, Olive. She appreciated how Gilbert's memoir promotes living life unconventionally and finding personal fulfillment outside traditional paths. This inspiration is evident in Olive's journey of self-exploration and her decision to forge her own path. So, Emma Gannon's novel Olive tells the story of a woman, no, who decides not to have children, even though most people around her expect her to. This idea of choosing a different life path is very similar to what Elizabeth Gilbert did in Eat, Pray, Love. Gilbert decided not to follow the traditional expectations of marriage and motherhood, and instead went on a journey to find happiness in her own way. Gannon said that Gilbert's book helped her believe that it's okay to make choices that go against what society expects. In Olive, the main character rather struggles with doubt, but like Gilbert, she learns to trust herself. Both book um, Both books show that being true to yourself, even when others don't understand, can lead to a more meaningful life. Next is Drink, Play, Fuck, and One Man's Search for Anything Across Ireland, Las Vegas, and Thailand by Andrew Gottlieb. Andrew Gottlieb, Drink, Play, Fuck is a satirical take on Eat, Pray, Love, presenting a male perspective on the journey of self-discovery. The book parodies Gilbert's memoir by following a man's escapades through Ireland, Las Vegas, and Thailand as he seeks pleasure and meaning after a divorce. Gottlieb's work underscores the cultural impact of Eat, Pray, Love, demonstrating how it has inspired both sincere and humorous responses in literature. Andrew Gottlieb's Drink, Play, Fuck is a funny and exaggerated version of Eat, Pray, Love, told from a man's point of view. No, so instead of seeking peace and spirituality, the main character goes looking for fun, excitement, and pleasure. He travels to places like Ireland, Las Vegas, and Thailand, which are known more for partying than for spiritual growth. This book is clearly a parody, meaning it imitates, no, Gilbert's memoir in a playful and humorous way. But even though it's a joke, it shows how popular and powerful Eat, Pray, Love became. Gottlieb's book wouldn't exist without Gilbert's original story, and it proves that her journey inspired other writers rather, even those who choose to make fun of it in creative ways. So that's all for the influence of the novel on other writings. Proceed to the analysis. Here we use the feminist theory and the post-colonial theory. So let's start with the feminist theory. First is rejection of traditional gender rules. Elizabeth Gilbert leaves behind the traditional rules of wife and caretaker. She refuses to define her life through marriage or motherhood. Her journey challenges the societal expectation that women must find fulfillment through family life. So Elizabeth Gilbert now starts the novel by walking away from her marriage, even though she had what many would call a perfect life, husband, house, and career. But she wasn't happy. In doing this, she rejects the idea that women are supposed to find meaning only through being a wife or a mother. She doesn't want to live by the rules society sets for women. Instead, she decides to find out who she is outside of those rules. This shows how a woman can choose her own path even if it goes against what expected. Next is assertion of female autonomy. Gilbert takes full control of her life by choosing to travel alone for a year. Her solo journey symbolizes a reclaiming of personal agency and independence. She makes decisions based on self-discovery, not societal pressure. Gilbert chooses to travel alone no, to Italy, India, and Indonesia. She's not doing it for a job or to follow someone else. She's doing it for herself. That kind of choice shows independence, no? So in feminist theory, this is really important because it highlights a woman making decision based on her own wants and needs. She takes control of her life and doesn't rely on anyone else to fix it for her. This kind of self-driven action is a powerful example of female autonomy or freedom. Next is emphasis on self-care and emotional healing. The narrative focuses on healing from emotional trauma through reflection rather. Feminist theory values the importance of emotional labor and mental well-being, which are often neglected in women's lives. Gilbert prioritizes mental health, a powerful statement of self-worth. So throughout the novel, Gilbert focuses on taking care of her emotional health now. She eats good food, meditates, writes, and spends time alone, all to help herself heal from depression and heartbreak. Feminist theory recognizes how women are often expected to take care of others and ignore their own needs. But in this novel, Gilbert puts herself first. That's not selfish, it's strong, right? So she shows that women have the right to care for their emotional well-being just like anyone else. Next is challenging patriarchal norms. Gilbert's decision to divorce and explore life on her own terms defies patriarchal expectations. She challenges the notion that women need a partner to be complete or happy. The novel promotes the idea that a woman's identity can exist outside of romantic relationships. So by leaving her marriage and not immediately looking for a new relationship, no, Gilbert challenges the idea that a woman needs a man to be happy. Society often tells women that love and marriage are the end goal of life. Gilbert says, no, that's not enough for me. She wants to understand herself, travel, and grow first. Her journey is a strong example of how women can define successful in their own way, not based on what others say it should be. Next is female solidarity and support systems. Gilbert builds meaningful friendships with other women throughout her journey. These relationships highlight the strength and value of female connection. The book affirms that women can grow through relationships with each other, not just with men. During her travels, no, Gilbert meets and connects with other women who play important roles in her life. For example, she becomes close to a woman at the ashram and later makes strong bonds in Bali. These friendships help her feel supported and understood. No, so in feminist theory, this kind of connection between women is very important. It shows that women, women don't have to compete. They can support and lift each other up. These relationships are just as important as romantic ones. So that's all for the analysis, no? Using the feminist lens. Next, we have the post-colonial theory. First, Western privilege and cultural exploration. Gilbert, a white American woman, travels to non-Western countries like India and Indonesia for personal healing. So she goes to places now that have very different histories, religions, and ways of life. But she's doing it mostly to feel better after her divorce. This shows that she has the money, time, and freedom to use other countries for her own personal reason. Her journey reflects a position of Western privilege. She enters these spaces not as someone from within but as a tourist seeking transformation. Because she's from the West, no? So she has the power to come and go as she pleases. People who live in those countries don't have the same freedom to visit the US and find themselves. So this shows a one-sided experience. So post-colonial theory questions this power dynamic where the West often consumes and benefits from other cultures without fully engaging with their histories and struggles. So the theory asks, is it fair that people from rich countries get to use parts of poor countries for personal gain without fully understanding the deeper history, pain, or reality of those places? Hmm. Next is exotism and spiritual tourism. India and Indonesia are portrayed as spiritual places that exist to guide the Western individual's self-growth. In the novel, these countries seem almost magical, like they were created just to help Gilbert find peace. But real countries are much more than just spiritual backgrounds. These cultures are sometimes simplified or romanticized, making them seem mystical or exotic. So the novel no, doesn't show the full picture of these places. Instead, it focuses on how interesting or mysterious they are to an outsider, which isn't always respectful or fair. This is a common issue in post-colonial critique. Non-Western societies are viewed through a lens that fits Western desires rather than as complex real places with their own voices. The theory reminds us now that people and cultures are not props or tools for someone else's journey. They have their own stories and deserve to be seen as whole and complex. Next is cultural appropriation and selective engagement. Gilbert uses elements of Indian and Balinese culture like yoga, meditation, and spiritual teaching for personal benefit. So she takes parts no, of this tradition because they help her heal. But these things like yoga and meditation come from deep old tradition that mean much more than just relaxation or stress relief. While she learns from these practices, she doesn't deeply explore their cultural, religious, or political roots. So she doesn't take the time not to truly understand where these practices come from or what they mean to the people who live there. That can feel shallow or even disrespectful. Postcolonial theory highlights how much selective use of culture can be seen as appropriation, where Westerners take parts of other cultures without honoring their full context. So the theory warns us about borrowing just the fun or helpful parts of a culture while ignoring its deeper meaning and history. It's like picking what you want from someone else's life without giving anything back. Next is silencing of local voices. In the narrative, locals in India and Indonesia are mostly background characters who help Gilbert on her journey. So the people she meets aren't given much of their own story, no. They are there mostly to support her or guide her, but we don't learn much about their lives. Their story struggles and inner lives are not deeply developed, so we don't hear what they think, feel, or go through in their everyday lives. The book doesn't spend time getting to know them fully. Post-colonial analysis draws attention to this lack of local perspective, showing how the focus remains on the Westerner's experience, not the voices of the people she meets. So this theory, asks, why do we only hear about the travelers and not the people in the places she visits? It's important to include their voices too, not just use them to tell someone else's story. Next is colonial echoes in travel narratives. Eat, Pray, Love follows a pattern found in many colonial era travel writings where Western travelers seek truth or spirituality in colonized lands. In the past, people from Europe would go to other lands to discover them or learn from them. These stories often made it seem like those lands only had value if they taught something to the West. This echoes colonial attitude where the West viewed itself as enlightened and non-Western lands as places to be discovered or used. It's an old way of thinking, no, where the West sees itself as smarter or better, and other places as tools for its benefits. That kind of thinking still shows up today in some travel stories, even if people don't realize it. Post-colonial theory sees this as a continuation of power imbalance where Western perspectives dominate global narratives. So this theory points out how the world is still often told from a Western point of view, and we need to pay attention to how that shapes stories like Eat, Pray, Love. Lastly, we have a call for ethical representation. From a post-colonial standpoint, the novel reminds us that storytelling should be more responsible in how it portrays cultures. So stories shape how we see the world now. When writers visit different cultures, they need to be careful not to make those places seem simple or only useful for outsiders. Readers are encouraged to ask, who is telling the story? Who culture is being used? And how can those voices be represented more fairly? So it's important to think about who gets to speak in the story and who gets left out. No, so the more balanced the voices are, the more respectful and fair the story becomes. It pre-love opens space for conversation on how personal journey can be more mindful of cultural boundaries and powerful differences. So the novel can still be inspiring, but it also teaches us to think about or to think more carefully about how we travel, how we tell stories, and how we interact with other cultures. So that's all for our discussion. Thank you so much.